What initially made you want to trek inside a living body?
I always have since I was a kid. Growing up, I was always fascinated by the body, particularly the digestive tract. Since the digestive tract is essentially one long tube, I dreamed of traveling through the mouth and exit through the anus.
How does one go about obtaining a craft capable of digestive travel?
Well, one must first acquire a shrink ray and a two-man submarine. My teammate, Robbie Robinson, successfully outfitted our entire craft with a layer of rubber to withstand the hydrochloric acid that is prevalent in the stomach. I was charged with placing boosters on the submarine to allow our submarine to fly into the mouth of our target. If I say so myself, I did an excellent job, with a successful flight in our first trial. Once everything was set, we angled the shrink ray at our craft and shrunk it with us inside. Once, at a proper size, we turned the shrink ray off and we were ready to find our target.
How does one actually get inside the digestive system?
Well, as soon as we were small enough, we took flight and headed straight for the local diner. Robbie and I navigated into the diner in search of a target. Once we found a man who chewed with his mouth agape, we flew into his mouth at hyperspeed. From there, we could enter the rest of the digestive system.
I understand your journey was very dangerous early on. Tell me some of the perils you faced.
It was frightening the moment we entered our target. He chewed like an animal. Our craft was thrashed about by a huge pink tongue, and the excreted saliva distorted our view out of our windshield. All the while, we had to avoid being crushed by the teeth. Robinson was fascinated by the salivary amylase, breaking down the waffle that our target had just placed in his mouth along with us. Just in time, Robinson lodged our craft in a forming bolus, and we were swallowed before we came to any harm. Just as we were swallowed, we watched the epiglottis shut into its position to protect food from entering the trachea.
Here is where your journey became very fascinating. Please elaborate on this portion of the journey.
While in the bolus, we were swallowed and went down the esophagus, later to be dumped into the stomach. Our journey was made quite easy by peristalsis, which forced us down the long tube. Finally, we slipped through the cardiac sphincter and arrived in the stomach. Here, we were battered by hydrochloric acid. Thankfully, our rubber outer shield protected us and the craft from any danger. Here, we were mixed and churned for over 2 hours. We passed the time by watching pepsin break down large proteins into smaller polypeptides. Soon enough, we sat in a flood of chyme, awaiting our entrance into the small intestine. The pyloric valve finally opened up, and we flowed into the duodenum of the small intestine. Here, the pancreas excreted various digestive juices, including trypsin, which helps break up the peptide bonds of the polypeptides and large proteins that didn't get broken down by the stomach. A bit of fat drifting by was quickly split by lipase into fatty acids and glycerol. Peptidase was also breaking down enzymes into amino acids, and maltase was breaking down the maltose. At the same time, the liver was producing bile, which breaks down large amounts of fat into small droplets. The bile was stored in the gallbladder, and my partner and I were fortunate enough to watch the bile be delivered to the fat through a series of bile ducts. Lactase was very interesting to see in action. Lactase is necessary for the digestion of lactose, which can be found in products, especially milk.
What was the high point of your journey?
Certainly the jejunum, the middle portion of the small intestine. My partner and I were fascinated by the villi, which soaked up the nutrients from the duodenum. It was incredible to see how much surface area that these villi created. It was exponential. After the jejunum, we ventured into the ileum, which is the last major segment of the small intestine.
How did you leave the digestive system?
Well, we entered the large intestine through the ileum. In the large intestine, the remaining goods from the small intestine were dried and compacted into solid form. Once our vessel was surrounded by feces, we proceeded into the rectum. Once it was time, we exited through the anus into a toilet through a series of steps that were too horrific to describe.
How did you go about becoming full-sized again?
After our sub took a trip through the digestive system, it was pretty low on fuel. Once we exited the toilet, we flew quickly back to our lab. Luckily, one of our staff members was on hand to switch the shrink ray into reverse, and here we are today.